The rain had not stopped for 3 days when they came for Lyra Hensley. She was kneeling beside her mother's grave, the only soft patch of earth in a pack territory that had never once been kind to her, when the guards found her. They did not ask questions. They did not wait for answers. They simply lifted her by the arms and dragged her through the mud toward the center of the Blackthorn territory, where Alpha King Draven Ashwood stood waiting beneath a black sky, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet hers. "Please," Lyra said, her voice breaking over the sound of the storm. "I did not touch your sister. I was nowhere near the woods that night." Draven did not answer at first. Behind him, his council whispered among themselves, and one voice rose above the rest, smooth and certain. It belonged to Corwin, his beta, the man who had stood at Draven's side since childhood, the man everyone trusted without question. "She was seen, Alpha," Corwin said. "The healer's daughter has always carried strange power in her blood. Who else would benefit from harming your sister, if not the girl whose mother you exiled years ago?" Lyra searched Draven's face for any flicker of doubt, any sign that he remembered the years she had spent quietly serving his pack, healing children who were not her own, asking for nothing in return. She found none. Grief had hollowed him out, and grief needed somewhere to go. "Banish her," Draven said, so quietly that the rain nearly swallowed the words. "Strip her of pack protection. Let her fate belong to the forest now." They did not give her a coat. They did not give her a blade. They walked her to the edge of Blackthorn territory, tore the pack mark from her wrist, and pushed her past the tree line into a darkness that had no promise of morning. Lyra did not look back. She had learned long ago that looking back only slowed the wound from closing. For the first few nights, survival was the only thought in her mind. She ate what she could find, drank from streams that tasted of iron, and slept in the hollow of trees with her back pressed against the bark, listening for wolves that were not her own. She expected to die. Some nights, she almost welcomed it. It was on the 7th night, when her strength had nearly left her completely, that she was found. A woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like moonlit water knelt beside her in the underbrush. She did not ask Lyra's name. She simply touched the mark on Lyra's shoulder, a birthmark shaped like a crescent that Lyra had spent her whole life hiding beneath long sleeves, and gasped. "Do you know what this is?" the woman whispered. Lyra shook her head, too weak to speak. "This is the mark of the chosen," the woman said. "The moon goddess has not claimed a chosen in 300 years, and she has claimed you." Lyra was carried from the forest that night by wolves who did not belong to any pack she recognized. They called themselves the Wandering Coven, a scattered group of shifters who lived beyond the boundaries of kings and territories, following moonlight instead of borders. They nursed her back to health with roots and quiet patience, and when her strength returned, they began to teach her. At first, Lyra resisted. She did not want power. She wanted only to survive, to disappear, to never again feel the particular pain of being unwanted by people she had once called family. But the coven's elder, the silver-haired woman named Marin, refused to let her hide. "Power like yours is not given so it can be wasted," Marin said one evening, as the moon rose full and heavy above them. "You were not banished by accident, child. You were banished because something in this world could not let you become what you were meant to be." Under Marin's guidance, Lyra discovered abilities she had never known existed. She could place her palm against a wound and feel it knit closed beneath her fingers. She could look into a person's eyes and know, with unshakable certainty, whether they spoke truth. On nights when the moon was brightest, she could feel the pull of every wolf within miles, as though invisible threads connected her to their hearts. 2 years passed this way. Lyra grew from a frightened, broken girl into something the coven began to speak of in hushed, reverent tones. She never forgot Blackthorn. She never forgot Draven's silence, or the way he had let his grief decide her fate without ever once looking her in the eye. But the anger softened over time into something quieter, something closer to sorrow than rage. Then came the sickness. It began in a small pack far to the north, wolves turning feral without warning, attacking their own families, losing themselves to a madness that no healer could explain or cure. Within months, it had spread through 3 kingdoms, packs turning against packs, alphas losing control of wolves who no longer recognized their own kin. The shifter world, once divided by pride and territory, was now united only by fear. Maren gathered the coven one night beneath a blood-red moon. "The goddess has spoken," she said, her voice trembling in a way Lyra had never heard before. "She says only her chosen can cleanse this curse. She says the source of this sickness was set in motion 3 years ago, in an act of cruelty that was never meant to happen." Lyra felt the truth settle into her bones before Maren even finished speaking. She knew, somehow, without being told, exactly where this curse had begun. Blackthorn. The journey back took 11 days. Lyra did not travel as the broken girl who had once been dragged through the mud. She walked at the head of a silver procession, wolves from every corner of the wandering lands falling into step behind her, drawn by a pull they could not explain and did not question. By the time they reached the edge of Blackthorn territory, the sky itself seemed to bend with silver light, as though the moon had lowered itself simply to watch her return. The pack guards who had once dragged her through the mud now stood frozen at the tree line, unable to move, unable to speak. Word spread through the territory faster than any messenger could carry it. The moon goddess's chosen has returned, and she is not alone. Draven emerged from his hall just as the sun began to set, and when he saw her, something in his chest seemed to collapse inward. 3 years had aged him more than time alone could explain. His eyes were rimmed with the particular exhaustion of a man who had spent every night since her banishment, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. "Lyra," he said, and her name sounded like something breaking in his mouth. She did not answer him right away. Instead, she walked past him, into the heart of the territory, where sick and feral wolves had been chained in the healing yard, thrashing against their bonds, foam at their mouths, eyes gone glassy and wrong. She knelt beside the nearest one, a young wolf no older than a boy, and placed her palm against his heaving chest. The madness did not vanish instantly, but beneath her touch, something in him steadied, quieted, remembered itself. His thrashing slowed. His breathing evened, and when he looked up at her, his eyes were clear for the first time in weeks. A murmur swept through the gathered pack, disbelief turning slowly into awe. It was Corwin who broke the silence, though not by choice. As Lyra moved to the next chained wolf, she paused, her hand hovering in the air, her gift for truth pulling something forward that she had not gone looking for. She turned toward the beta, who stood at the edge of the crowd with a stillness that did not match the panic rising in his eyes. "You knew," she said quietly, "you knew what caused this sickness, because you caused it." The crowd turned as one toward Corwin, whose composure finally cracked. He tried to speak, to deny it, but Lyra's gift would not allow the lie to hold its shape. The truth spilled out of him whether he wished it or not, dragged forward by a power older than his fear. 3 years ago, hungry for more influence within the pack, Corwin had used a forbidden ritual to weaken Draven's sister, intending only to create a crisis he could resolve and be rewarded for. He had never meant for it to spread. He had never meant for the sickness to take on a life of its own, and when suspicion fell toward an innocent girl instead of himself, he had said nothing to stop it. "You let them banish me," Lyra said, and for the first time since her return, her voice trembled, not with anger, but with the old grief finally finding its voice. "You let them cast me into the forest to die, knowing I had done nothing." Draven's face went pale as the pieces fell into place. 3 years of guilt suddenly finding its true target. He turned to Corwin, and the fury in his eyes was unlike anything the pack had seen from their king before. But before he could act, Lyra raised a hand. "He will answer for this," she said, "but not through anger. Anger is what started this. It will not end it." Corwin was taken away by the pack guards, stripped of his rank, to face judgment through proper means, rather than a king's grief-driven fury. And Lyra, though every reasonable part of her might have wanted to walk away, to leave Blackthorn to the consequences of what it had done to her, turned instead back to the healing yard, where wolves still writhed in chains, waiting for a mercy they had never offered her. She worked through the night. One by one, she knelt beside the afflicted, her palm against their chests, drawing the sickness out through sheer force of the gift the goddess had given her. By dawn, every chained wolf in the yard had opened clear eyes, remembering themselves, remembering their families, weeping with the particular relief of people who had feared they would never come back from where they had gone. Draven found her sitting alone at the edge of the yard as the sun rose, her strength nearly spent, silver light still clinging faintly to her skin, like mist that refused to lift. "Why?" he asked, his voice raw. "After everything we did to you, would you save us?" Lyra looked up at him, and for a long moment, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice held no bitterness, only a tired kind of honesty. "Because your sister did nothing wrong. Because that young wolf in the yard did nothing wrong. Because the pack that raised me, cruel as it was, is still filled with people who deserved better than what fear and grief allowed to happen." She paused. "I am not doing this for you, Draven. I never was." It was then that something in Draven finally broke completely. The Alpha King, who had ruled Blackthorn with an iron will since he was a young man, who had never once been seen to weep in front of his pack, sank to his knees before her in the mud, the same mud that had once swallowed her pleas for mercy. "I was wrong," he said, his voice cracking apart. "I let my grief decide what my heart should have known. I banished the one person who never deserved it, and I have spent 3 years living inside that mistake. I am not asking you to forgive me. I am asking only that you know I see it now. All of it." The pack watched in silence as their king wept before the woman he had cast out, silver moonlight settling over the healing yard like a blessing neither of them had expected to receive. Lyra did not offer him easy forgiveness, and she did not pretend that 3 years of exile could be undone with a single apology. But she reached out and helped him to his feet, because mercy, she had learned, was not about forgetting what had been done. It was about choosing, even now, not to become the cruelty that had once been done to her. In the weeks that followed, Blackthorn began to heal, not only from the sickness Corwin had unleashed, but from the fear and pride that had allowed an innocent woman to be sacrificed so easily. Lyra did not return to Blackthorn as anyone's mate, and she did not stay because Draven asked her to. She stayed because the wandering coven, and the pack that had once betrayed her, and the young wolf whose eyes she had cleared in the healing yard, all needed a chosen who understood that true strength was never about power alone. The moon goddess, it was said, watched over the territory that season with unusual brightness, as though pleased to see her chosen finally walking a path that belonged entirely to her, chosen not by a king, not by a pack, but by her own unbreakable will to become more than what cruelty had tried to make of her.